Does a spiritual thread exist? A thread running throughout human history, connecting generation after generation of esoteric seekers, adepts, and teachers, keeping alive that peculiar strain of thinking that we can only call the Western mystery tradition, because the concepts are too elusive and too ephemeral to fall under any neat and easy categorization. Does such a thread exist? Well, in The Golden Thread, author Joscelyn Godwin makes precisely that case, and I find it a rather convincing one. Now, the book was published in 2007 by Quest Books. The author, Joscelyn Godwin, is a professor of music history at Colgate University. He's also a respected author on various books on various subjects of spirituality, religion, but primarily the Western mystery traditions, Hermeticism, matters of the esoteric, matters of the occult. Now, this particular book is very well written. I love good writing, I admire good writing, and I always like to call it out when I see it. It's very efficient, very economical. Each sentence is very tightly crafted. There's no fat on this writing at all. Every sentence serves a purpose, and every word within each of those sentences serves a purpose. That's the sign of a great writer, of nonfiction anyway. When you get to literature, I think a little fat is sometimes okay if you're going for poetic effect. Actually, I like some obese books if I'm going to be honest. When it comes to literature, when it comes to the art of literature and poetry, I'm okay with some obese books on that. But when it comes to nonfiction, I appreciate just clean, economical writing, and that's what Godwin has here. It's very good writing, and I wanted to call it out. On top of that, the book is full of fascinating tidbits of history, going all the way back to ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, telling all of these stories of these characters and these events that they seem almost like a fantasy novel, like a J.R.R. Tolkien type thing, when you go back far enough in time. But there's also matters of more recent history. Basically what I'm saying is the book is full of interesting tidbits and facts, and if that's your bag, then go for it. It's a great book for that purpose. However, what interests me most about the book and what I want to discuss today is the overarching thesis, which I find compelling and fascinating and just well worth discussing. So the book starts back ancient Egypt and Greece, and it moves all the way up through the peak of the Theosophical Society towards the modern day. And it shows how this secret knowledge of the Western mystery tradition, the Western esoteric tradition, if you want to call it that. And I say this understanding that these things don't flow in such a neat and orderly way that they really are one cohesive school per se. But it's a general line of thinking, and in order to discuss it, it's convenient to use a term like the Western mystery tradition or the Western esoteric tradition. And so the book traces the movement of this tradition from beginning to end, from ancient Greece and Egypt up to the modern day. And in it, Godwin illustrates how this line of thinking has persevered through many cataclysmic events and conscious intents by various ruling forces to wipe this strain of thinking out of the human record entirely. That in itself is fascinating. It's amazing how this strain of thinking, this line of thinking, how it has persevered and been kept alive. Every time it seems to die, every time it seems like it's been extinguished from this planet, some character, some organization, some group, some event, something happens, something pops up, and it's resurrected all over again. And it ebbs and flows, goes through periods of increased popularity, decreased popularity, having to go fully occulted, fully hidden to escape persecution, and at other times becoming more accepted, finding its way into normal daily conversation more readily. But through it all, this thread persists, connected by those who are interested in. Ultimately, the books are great, obviously. The writings are great, obviously. The hieroglyphics, all of these things, all of these records, these written records, these things are great. But ultimately, it's the people that keep it alive. It's us. It's the people, it's those of us who, for some reason, from the moment that we're young, we just feel compelled for a deeper understanding of God, of the universe, a deeper understanding of ourselves. I don't know why I'm filled with this any more than I'm sure any of you do. But it is what it is, right? We have to be who we are. We have no other choice. Trust me. I've tried. I've tried to live a false life. It leads to diseases of the body, of the mind, of the spirit. Don't do it. It's not good. Be yourself. But anyway, in the book, Godwin, being the scholar that he is, he sticks to the facts. He sticks to logical, philosophical cases. And he avoids wild conjecture, which I imagine, I'm not Godwin, I don't know Godwin, but I would imagine it would be difficult in this case because the subject matter itself just kind of lends itself up to wild conjecture. But Godwin avoids that, respectfully. So you can read this book, even from a materialistic, some may say a normie perspective, and just look at it and see how these events played out historically. And it's interesting on those feet alone. You don't have to be into the weird. You don't have to be into, well, what other people find weird, what other people find strange. You don't have to be into that to appreciate this book. I recommend it to anybody, even if you're just interested in ancient history and religious traditions, spiritual traditions. But for those of you who are part of this strange tribe that seems tied together by this thread, I'm going to continue talking for and to you, because I think this book is immensely important if you are one of those people. And I cannot recommend it highly enough if you are one of those people. And I particularly recommend it to those of you who are just finding yourselves on this path, newly on this path, this interest. I wish that I had discovered it much earlier. Not that I don't think that not reading it created any difficulties or problems in my life or anything, but it is nice. It's really nice to have this overview, this big picture look at this tradition and how it has run through everything. You know, I started talking about how Godwin avoids wild conjecture. I'm not afraid to go into wild conjecture. I am not a professional academic. I almost went that route, by the way, and I didn't precisely because I want to be able to talk about stuff like this. I want to be able to talk about things that actually truly interest me and not have to hem my interests and my passions and my curiosity in to fit some model that is put forth by academic robots. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to go with the wild conjecture. And to start with that, I was communicating with someone. I'm not going to say his name. He probably wouldn't even care if I did say his name, but I respect people's privacy, and unless somebody explicitly tells me, hey, I'm good with you sharing this, I don't share things. I have people who have told me personal secrets, not even minor things, and I've never breathed a word about them. Decades of silence. It's just the way I roll. And so this gentleman shared with me the idea that the thing keeping the golden thread together is an egregore. Now, for those of you unfamiliar, an egregore is, the way that I conceptualize it, the way that I would explain it, is when multiple people share an interest. When that interest could be anything. It could be a sports team, it could be your family unit, but it could also be a political ideology, a spiritual ideology, a philosophy, a nationality, any of these things. That when people share this common interest, their consciousnesses become entangled. And if the underlying motivating force, whatever it is, say like the nationality, the spirituality, the symbol, the being, whatever it is, if it is powerful enough, if it is compelling enough, then this entangled consciousness can become so powerful that it takes on a life of its own and, for all intents and purposes, becomes its own entity. And so it is no longer being formed and influenced by the individual human consciousnesses. It is also informing them back, in some cases perhaps controlling them back. You know, there's degrees here. There's a spectrum for how powerful the egregore could be. And when you hear the concept, I think a lot of people, it's kind of easy to go think of it as a nefarious thing, but it's not. It's a morally it's not a moral thing by nature. The egregore is dependent upon the force that is compelling people enough to create the egregore. So it can be good or bad. And so I just want to make that clear, that when we say that there's an egregore that is the golden thread, that is keeping this tradition alive against all odds. That doesn't mean it's a nefarious or bad thing. It simply is, right? And for those of us who take a lot of value from these studies, I would say it's a dang good egregore, and I'm glad it exists if it does. And so I found the remark by my friend to be very interesting and very compelling, because it means that it's not happenstance, it's not accident, but it's even more interesting than that, because when I read something like this, my mind goes to the idea that it's an external force that is keeping this tradition alive, kind of as a gift to humanity, or at least a gift to those of us who are born with this intense and peculiar interest. But saying that's an egregore switches that up a little bit, because yes, the egregore can have its independent existence to a degree, but it is still very much dependent on the people that are keeping it alive through their attention and through their emotions and through their focus. And I like that, because it means that everyone who feels this call, who feels this gravity pulling them in this certain direction, we're part of this egregore. We're part of this literal lineage of consciousness. Godwin calls it the golden thread. I think of it as a lineage of consciousness. This thing that calls to us and says, keep me alive, I'm important. People need me. Humanity needs me. I'm important. Don't let me go. I find that poetic, and I find it inspiring, and I find it really just kind of beautiful, honestly. And any of you who are out there who are still listening, I think most of you who follow my channel at all, you're part of this tradition to some degree. I love the fact that my channel has, or I don't know if this is still true, but up till now at least, because I'm always losing and gaining followers, and I'm never sure who I'm losing and who I'm gaining. But I've always loved the diversity of the people following this channel, because I have people who come from a more of a traditional Christian bent, but then I have people who are into the most occult aspects of things. I have people of all parts of the range in between. And as long as you're not a jerk, I like talking to people with different ideas. So I love that about the followers of this channel. And so I don't know how happy you would be with me saying that you are part of this tradition. And that's fine. But for those of you who do feel this kinship with people who are drawn to these mysteries, all I can say is it's kind of cool, right? To read Godwin's book and to consider this idea that we are part of a long and vast lineage that has been keeping these interests and this perspective and this knowledge alive for thousands of years. Every time it seems to be squelched out, every time they burn the libraries down, every time they burn the heretics, someone emerges and keeps it alive. Sometimes it's barely kept alive. Sometimes it's on life support, but it's kept alive. And then it has times where it gains strength, and it gets to leave the hospital, run outside. It gets to run outside and be free, and to engage with all the other people. But then something comes along, drives it back into the infirmary, back into the shadows. But that's beautiful too. Because it takes a licking, keeps on ticking. You can knock it down, but you can't knock it out. Not permanently, anyway. I find that fascinating, beautiful, inspiring. All words I've already used just a minute ago, I think 2 minutes ago. But still, that is what inspired me the most about this book. And so, while I absolutely recommend it to people of any frame of thought, if you're into spiritual and religious traditions, just from a purely materialistic intellectual aspect, the book is there. The book is worthwhile. But if you're part of that tribe, if you're part of this, perhaps part of the egregore, I can't recommend the book highly enough. And truly, it will link you with a sense of history, of lineage, and I want to say belonging. I don't like using that word simply because it's used so much by weak people, and I am not fond of weakness. However, it is true. It does do that as well. And so Yeah, I just recommend it for those of you who are part of this strange tribe. I think you will walk away feeling ennobled by your interests, by your peculiar strain of thinking, inspired by this weird call that you hear telling you, read these weird old books, explore these ideas. There's a purpose to it, there's a reason to it. I think this book shows us what that purpose and what that reason is. Or maybe not what that purpose and what that reason is, but the book does show that it is something valuable with a long history and with deep value that many people have died and suffered to keep alive, to get through to this day, to where we can take that baton, to where we can take that torch, take it into the next level. So that's about it. Hope everybody's doing well. Take care of yourselves. Peace out.